For the last 3 decades, PTTEP has explored with determination and produced with expertise in an ethical and transparent manner. Explore happiness and produce a sustainable quality of life. Because energy security is the beginning of every life. We will grow together for sustainable energy. PTTEP, Energy Partner of Choice.
ครูคนนี้เข้ามาสอนคอมพิวเตอร์ในโรงเรียนที่ไม่มีคอมพิวเตอร์สักเครื่องเดียวให้กับนักเรียนที่ไม่เคยเห็นมันมาก่อนในชีวิตดิจิทัลบัสจะเป็นหนึ่งในจุดเริ่มต้นของการเรียนรู้เทคโนโลยีขั้นพื้นฐานและการนำเทคโนโลยีเพื่อไปต่อยอดให้เกิดประโยชน์ได้จริงดิจิทัลบัสจะเดินทางไปทั่วประเทศไทยเพื่อมอบความรู้จากความเชี่ยวชาญที่มีเพราะเราเชื่อว่าเทคโนโลยีเป็นของทุกคนเราจึงมุ่งมั่นที่จะนำระบบดิจิทัลไปสู่ทุกคนทุกบ้านและทุกองค์กรเพื่อประเทศไทยที่เชื่อมต่อกันได้อย่างสมบูรณ์แบบ
ฟินเวสติดปีกนักลงทุนไทยออกไปบุกโลกซื้อกองทุนทั่วโลกได้ตรงกว่า33บลจ.ไม่เสียค่าธรรมเนียมซ้ำซ้อนชี้เป้ากองทุนให้ทุกสัปดาห์แอปแรกที่ซื้อกองทุนต่างประเทศได้ตรงด้วยตัวเองเปิดบัญชีง่ายดาวน์โหลดเลย FinWest Your Wings Your Ways
For the last 3 decades, PTTEP has explored with determination and produced with expertise in an ethical and transparent manner. Explore happiness and produce a sustainable quality of life. Because energy security is the beginning of every life. We will grow together for sustainable energy. PTTEP, Energy Partner of Choice.
ครูคนนี้เข้ามาสอนคอมพิวเตอร์ในโรงเรียนที่ไม่มีคอมพิวเตอร์สักเครื่องเดียวให้กับนักเรียนที่ไม่เคยเห็นมันมาก่อนในชีวิต ดิจิทัลบัสนี้ จะเป็นหนึ่งในจุดเริ่มต้นของการเรียนรู้เทคโนโลยีขั้นพื้นฐานและการนำเทคโนโลยีเพื่อไปต่อยอดให้เกิดประโยชน์ได้จริงดิจิทัลบัสจะเดินทางไปทั่วประเทศไทยเพื่อมอบความรู้จากความเชี่ยวชาญที่มีเพราะเราเชื่อว่าเทคโนโลยีเป็นของทุกคนเราจึงมุ่งมั่นที่จะนำระบบดิจิทัลไปสู่ทุกคนทุกบ้านและทุกองค์กรเพื่อประเทศไทยที่เชื่อมต่อกันได้อย่างสมบูรณ์แบบ
ฟินเวสติดปีกนักลงทุนไทยออกไปบุกโลกซื้อกองทุนทั่วโลกได้ตรงกว่า33บลจ.ไม่เสียค่าธรรมเนียมซ้ำซ้อนชี้เป้ากองทุนให้ทุกสัปดาห์แอปแรกที่ซื้อกองทุนต่างประเทศได้ตรงด้วยตัวเองเปิดบัญชีง่ายดาวน์โหลดเลย Finvest Your Wings Your Ways
Good afternoon, distinguished guests. I'd like to welcome you to Bangkok Post Forum 2021 75th anniversary of the Bangkok Post Resilient Thailand Ways to Bounce Back. My name is Warin Saturday. I'll be your moderator of this event. It has been such an honor to be given this excellent opportunity by Bangkok Post. You are invited to watch this event and listen to English language through Bangkok Post, Facebook and YouTube, and listen to the Thai language of Post today. As everyone may know, we remain in a period where we need to strictly control the spreading of COVID-19. Bangkok Post has underlined this importance of your safety. That's why we organize this event as a virtual conference. All team members have been screened the COVID-19 rapid test before starting work today. And everyone will definitely be able to be part of this interesting event. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been more than 2 years since Thailand is facing the COVID-19 pandemic, and it has tremendously affected our country. What's most evident is the economy. We lost tremendous revenues from inbound tourists, hotels, restaurants, airlines, shopping malls, or major tourist attractions all suffer economic problems. However, we also see collaboration from sectors, both the public and the private, who work hard to lead Thailand out of this crisis. We also see people helping each other. A major hope to drive Thailand out of this economic crisis resulted from the pandemic is the procurement and import of vaccination from both the public and private sectors. This is to ensure that all get vaccinated and the pandemic can be put in control as fast as possible. More than half of the target, 70% of our population has now get vaccinated. A third boosting dose is being launched, and this is a great signal of Thailand's recovery for our economy to bounce back. But which strategies will help recover Thailand? Today, we will learn that together. We are honored to have representatives from the public sector, namely His Excellency Mr. Supattanapong Panmichao, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy, Governor of Tourism Authority of Thailand, Mr. Yuttasak Supasorn, as well as representatives from the private sector, who are already here to share experience for Thailand economy from their perspective. Before starting this event, I would like to welcome Mr. Vorachai Pichanjit, Vice President, Bangkok Post Public Company Limited, to deliver an official welcome speech. His Excellency Mr. Supattanapong Panmichao, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy, Mr. Yuttasak Supasorn, Governor, Tourism Authority of Thailand, speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Bangkok Post Public Company Limited, I'm pleased to welcome everyone to Bangkok Post Forum 2021, which is held this year to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Bangkok Post newspaper. Bangkok Post is Thailand's oldest newspaper and has become part of the Thai society. The newspaper has been highly recognized locally and abroad. It is our commitment to present reliable, precise, and just news information, to create virtue and promote what's right for the Thai society. For almost 2 years, all sectors in Thailand has been affected by the global pandemic of COVID-19. Yet, thanks to hard work and commitment of medical personnel, collaboration of all parties, whether it's the government, private sector, and the Thai public, as well as the government's policy and measure. Today, Thailand has been through its worst moment. We are working towards an important goal, namely to open the country to welcome international tourists in this upcoming November. Realizing the importance of this goal, which will help recover the tourism sector and the Thai economy. On the occasion of our 75th anniversary, Bangkok Post is organizing the Bangkok Post Forum 2021 under the theme Resilient Thailand, Ways to Bounce Back. This is for all sectors to learn directions with regard to Thailand's economic recovery and the opening of the country to welcome tourists after the pandemic situation is getting better. The forum also aims to listen to perspectives from private and public sector representatives and economic experts. On behalf of Bangkok Post Public Company Limited, I wish to thank His Excellency Suphattanapong Panmichao, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy, Tourism Authority of Thailand Governor Kun Yuttasak Supasorn, for delivering keynote speeches for us today. I also wish to thank speakers and sponsors who help realizing this event. And finally, I wish to thank all viewers and listeners. I hope you'll be able to fully benefit from today's event. Thank you. I would like to thank Kun Vorachai Pichanjit, Vice President of Bangkok Post Public Company Limited, for your welcome speech. For today, we are honored to have several esteemed guest speakers who will share their perspectives at today's event. This includes our Deputy Prime Minister, who will tell us about policy or way forward to rehabilitate Thailand post-COVID. Please welcome His Excellency Mr. Suphattanapong Panmichai, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy, for his keynote speech.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to Mr. Vorachai Pichanjit, Vice Chairman of Bangkok Post Public Company Limited, Governor Yuttasak Supasorn of the Tourism Authority of Thailand, Mr. Abel Deung, Chief Executive Officer of Huawei Technologies Thailand Company Limited, Kun Prin Panichapak, Deputy Leader and Head of Economic Team of the Democrat Party, Mr. Emmanuel Diliptia Rajakaria, Group Chief Executive Officer of Miner International, and Mr. Stanley Kang, Chairman of the Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce in Thailand. And I believe that the discussion today, in this today discussion, you will hear the views and perspectives from the government and private sector representatives. And there are many issues of interest that we will share with you, and I believe that Kun Yuttasak, TAT Governor, will share with you the phasing of our reopening the country to international tourist arrivals following the piloting of Phuket's sandboxed scheme. We have been working very closely with the private sector, and I believe that Huawei Technologies, Kun Abel, will also chip in with the contribution that Huawei, particularly with its technological capabilities, will be able to help support the Thai economy going forward. And in the panel discussion later on, Kun Prin, Kun Emmanuel, and Kun Stanley will share their perspectives because Kun Prin represents a new leadership who heads the economic team of a political party, who will share his experiences and expertise. And Mr. Emmanuel has been actively involved in providing his inputs on what steps should be undertaken in order to help reopen Thailand. to the world economy and Kun Stanley Kang will reflect the perspectives of international foreign investors in Thailand and how the ease of doing business in Thailand can be further improved. And I hope that the listeners and viewers will fully benefit from the event today. But first of all, let me congratulate the Bangkok Post Company Limited for celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Bangkok Post. It is the oldest English language newspaper in Thailand. It has been well recognized both here in the country as well as internationally. And so let me congratulate the Bangkok Post, and I'm very pleased to be here to join all of you at the Bangkok Post Forum 2021, Resilient Thailand, Ways to Bounce Back. How are we going to boost our economy post-COVID-19? So I will share with you the direction that we would like to undertake to transform the economy post-COVID. I have mentioned to Kun Warachai, and in his speech, he already said that it's almost 2 years since the first outbreak of COVID-19 has been ravaging the world economy. We have been faced with one of the most difficult challenges, even though we have managed very well at the beginning to contain the outbreaks. And as both have mentioned, that the collaboration across sectors have contributed to better containment measures, and we have to thank medical staff for helping Thailand to cope with several waves of the infections, and the situation have improved to a certain extent. But still, lockdown restrictions are still required because of the emergence of new variants and mutation of COVID viruses that we have detected in the recent past. So I have to admit that it has been very difficult. And the procurement of vaccines in the face of the rising demand across the world to deal with the more infectious variants have put the government's efforts to procure adequate vaccines on a difficult pathway. And even at the moment, we are still able to see positive signs of the situation improving, but the new variants continue to be of concern, but the number of new infections are dropping. So over the past 2 years, we will have to continue to use all the methods that we have available in order to contain the outbreaks, as well as to have the health and hygiene measures in place. And the government believes that we will be able to procure 180 million doses, and we will continue to roll out the vaccine program so that the first, the second, and the third booster doses can be administered to medical staff, and the frontline personnel will be given the vaccines so that we will be able to have the immunity to deal with the outbreaks. And lately, you probably have heard about the antivirus medicines that has proved to be effective, and it will be able to help those who have started to show signs of the symptom at the beginning to be treated quickly. And this is something that the government is now considering to make sure that we can can reduce the fatalities among the most vulnerable, like the elderly and those with underlying conditions. And at the moment, and we believe that the number of vaccines to be procured will be sufficient. But we're also looking ahead to the acquisition of vaccines next year, and 60 million extra doses of AstraZeneca will be procured under a contract signed. And we hope that we will additionally obtain 150 million doses for the boosters, as well as to cover the rest of the population. So I have to express my appreciation for all sectors of the Thai population who have played an important role in contributing to the containment measures. And I believe that the situation will continue to improve, and especially when you compare it with April last year when there was no vaccine available. And so this year, we hope that we will have sufficient vaccines available to fulfill the goals that we have. And we have already put in place the plan to acquire additional vaccines for next year in order to allow Thailand to have the herd immunity and to be able to contain the spread of the disease effectively, so as to enable Thailand to be on the road to full recovery and reopening of our economy. But over the past few months, of course, because of stringent measures we put in place, as well as the continuing outbreak around the world, we have seen the economy contracted 6.1% in 2020, but the situation this year has improved, and because of the lockdown restrictions, some spillover impact on the economy still being felt. But we hope that the economy will continue to improve because of the strong export performance. And by the end of the third quarter and the beginning of the fourth quarter, we will see better economic figures going forward. We are now putting in place several measures in order to accommodate the reopening of the Thai economy. In the past, we have relied quite heavily on tourism and tourism-related businesses. If you look at the proportion of the tourism industry contribution to the Thai GDP is over 2 trillion baht. So the impact that we felt has been quite significant. So how can we make up for the loss of the revenues from tourism? So that's why the government has come up with some of the pilot schemes in order to reopen certain destinations, starting with Phuket, which we consider to have to be very prepared and ready to open Phuket since the 1st of July. And we are successful to a certain extent. And Governor Yuttasak will provide you with more details about what we have done so far and what we are going to do in the fourth quarter and the first quarter next year. We hope that we will receive high purchasing power tourists, at least 1 million. High value-added travelers will be coming to Thailand, and the spending per capita per each tourist will be very high, and that will help us to be able to slowly and gradually opening more destinations in the countries. We used to have 40 million tourist arrivals and able to raise over 2 trillion baht revenue. But we also suffer from overcrowding in certain destinations, and we have to extract lessons learned from the previous activities in the tourism-related businesses to understand what we need to undertake in order to transform the tourism-related industries going forward, and which I believe the governor will tell you more. In order to reopen Thailand, like what we have done in Phuket, we require collaboration from all agencies, the local authorities, social sectors, social society, the businesses have to chip in, including our medical staff, have to maintain close surveillance in order to assure the public and the visitors of the health and safety measures. And we will start to opening more of the areas. And many countries are now watching what Thailand has been doing to see what results we will be able to achieve. And I believe that what we have done so far has resulted in very positive results, and we are able to raise revenue in the short term. And there are other issues, as you are aware, as a result of the economic slowdown. The government has issued the emergency decree to raise 1 trillion baht loans in order to help provide reliefs, financial reliefs to small businesses like SMEs, or to add liquidity in the financial system to cushion the impact of the pandemic on the Thai economy. And at the same time, we are able to add and strengthen business as well as household bottom lines. And we also provide support, including increasing liquidity to major corporations. So all businesses in the supply chain, whether they're big or small, will be taken care of so that their credibility can be restored in order to ensure access to credit. And we are continuing to implement these measures to support small and medium enterprises in order to help them access credit. And we have several programs in order to help lessen the debt burdens, either to postpone the debt repayment or the payment holiday. As the Bank of Thailand has already issued the policy guidelines on the 3rd of September in order to provide a basis for all sectors to help address the debt burden of businesses which are affected by the ongoing wave of COVID-19. So the government has worked very hard in order to address the economic impact of COVID-19. The crisis is not yet over, but we are able to be on a better ground at the moment as a result of a series of initiatives that have been implemented. And of course, the containment measures will gradually be eased as the situation improves. And lockdown measures will be gradually relaxed to bring about the return to normal activities, both economic and social activities, because these are all related. But at the same time, of course, we have to maintain financial stability. And lately, as you know, that 500 billion dollars US baht has already been the emergency decree to raise additional 500,000 baht have already been issued, and the country's credibility has been maintained at BBB plus and with stable outlook and so we are showing improvements since the start of the outbreak. We are able to maintain our financial stability.
So we are not going to be careless, and in the latest development, many countries, especially those in the West, they have relaxed their measure. And if you see, you don't really see them wearing masks today, and then they go out to spending in order to recover their economy. And I think this is going to affect Thailand. The fact it is related to the price of energy, the production of the fuel oil is affected by the weather in the US, Europe, or Russia, which are oil suppliers to the West. They are confronting with production disruption, and that's why the energy price is soaring. And this also led to the increase of price of other minerals, and we are closely monitoring this movement. As soon as demands are high and the production is low, together with volatility of the weather, and all of this can happen. So we are closely monitor them, and the government tries to ensure to minimize possible impact in order to stabilize our economy, as well as to monitor the inflation. And what is happening right now, we think that this is going to be short term, and once again, we think that this high price of oil is temporary. However, we will closely monitor. And as I said, during the past 3 years, we have confronted so many crises. And the latest thing is the flood. And right now, the soaring price of the energy, and they are all challenges. But we will do our best to minimize impacts to the Thai public. As to ways to bounce back, or what we are going to do at the next stage, I would like to touch upon two things. And I would like you to look into the 13 National Social and Economic Plan. And I believe that this plan is quite clear in terms of delivering the direction that Thailand will go forward. So the plan talks about Thailand entering trade agreements, and this is going to help our exports, and we will expedite whatever that we need to do under this agreement. And the thing that is in our 13 plans that I would like to share Actually, there are many issues, but what I like to share is the decarbonization. As I have said before, the energy situation, and you can also feel the climate change. And last year there was a polar vortex in Texas, USA, and right now it's happening again, and it affects the oil price. So at the COP's meeting, the most recent COP meeting, it set the target that the world's temperature should not rise more than 1.5 degree. And so this is the target to be realized in 2050, if I'm not wrong. So this is the rule, the international rule, the new rule for the global community to achieve. And Thailand, in our 13 national plan, also aims to reduce the emission of the greenhouse gas in 2050 and between 2050 and 2070. So this will lead to new industries, for example, renewable energy. And right now we have solar cells, solar farms, biomass, hydropower from neighboring countries, and we aim to increase the proportion of renewable energy by more than 50% in the next 10 years. And this is our target. In addition, we aim to enhance EV, electric vehicle production. So in 2030, it's going to be 30% of EV being produced in Thailand, and we need to lay down the ecosystem in order to materialize the electric vehicle industry, whether it's about the charging station, the grid or transmission system, because electricity to be consumed by the EV industry needs to be stabilized. As a result, the electricity generation and transmission systems must also be improved. And this is going to happen in Thailand during the next 3 to 5 years. The government have discussed with foreign EV manufacturers. We have invited those who are interested, and by the end of the year, we will issue a clear policy that we will promote the EV as well as related industry such as smart electronic, charging stations, and we'll be able to reduce the GHG emission by 2016. And in order to produce the EV, it means that the energy that will be used to manufacture EV must also be clean. And with regard to energy consumption, we aim to reduce the energy being used by all sectors by 30% in 2040. We will increase areas that to do the reforestation, and this is going to generate revenues. The reforested forest will be able to absorb the carbon dioxide, leading the country, Thailand, to comply with the global community's commitment to reduce carbon dioxide and to maintain the world temperature to not rise by more than 1.5 degrees. In addition, I like to also talk about tourism, which will be added by the governor of the TAT later. We will focus at wealthy tourism, the elderly, those, the so-called nomads who use Thailand as a basis for work. We also want to attract long-term residents, and there will be supporting measures. And I think Bangkok Post has already reported to readers, so I'm not going to go into detail. However, we believe that these groups of persons, totaling about 1 million persons, this will generate or will increase a long-term revenue and will compensate the loss of the tourism, the conventional tourism revenues. One more thing that is interesting that I like to share here is about new industries. And Thai government has identified industry in the S-curve environment, such as smart electronic. And I like to tell you that during the past 7 years, Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha has laid down fundamentals by building infrastructure, whether it's in the telecommunication sectors and other sectors, the transport sector, the mass transit sector. So all of this aims to create the ecosystem in order to attract investment, new investment in the S-curve environment, whether it's about electronic, medical, tech, industry, and quality tourism. What the government has done during the past 7 years, and people may say that this government love to borrow. However, money from the borrowing is invested in the infrastructure in order to attract new investment and to expand growth and prosperity to the region. For example, right now we have double rail trains linking Thailand and the neighboring countries. We have roads and highways, whether it's linking the capital to the borders. And we also start trading electricity with the neighboring countries. So we aim to become the regional hub in terms of connection, and we have done. And in the next 1 or 2 years, these infrastructure projects will gradually complete. And right now you see the central Bang Sue station. You also see the red line, mass transit train. And probably you may not have a clear picture because the construction is going on everywhere, and it takes time. The progress of these projects has been at a certain stage, yet this is not enough. We aim to create the ecosystem. We built the special economic zone, whether it's about EEC, Eastern Economic Corridor, and those along the borders. And for the digital infrastructure, probably Kun Abel Deng will tell you further, because Huawei technology has played a major role and is very confident in Thailand's digital technology and infrastructure. So aside from setting the ecosystem and the infrastructure, which I think will gradually be completed within the next few years, we also aim to improve the bureaucracy, the government system,
Ease of doing business.
the ease of the doing business to attract those foreign business to invest in Thailand. This means to reduce the bureaucratic layers using the help of digitalization. Right now, the Department of Customs has already completed its systems to either import or export your product. You can go to the Department of Customs platform, and probably you still need to apply for to fill up forms. However, the central platform is already complete, and I believe that foreign investors in Thailand, for example, Kun Stanley Kang, and I have a chance to talk with Kun Kang, and as I said, the government is committed to make the system better, and in the future, with regard to the e-document, about the identification, and if we can complete all of these, and of course, business transaction will be easier. So this is the another ecosystem aimed to attract foreign investment into Thailand. And in terms of human resources, this is very important. There are innovative institutes being established in Thailand, and if you have a chance, please go to visit ECI. This is an institute, and biorefinery infrastructure has been invested at ECI. And this will be another new industry to happen in Thailand. So this is roughly what I would like to tell you. However, there are much more details in the 13 plan, and I urge you to follow the plan. And I believe, as I said, that the plan will be clear, very comprehensive, and what I just shared with you is just part of the plan. So aside from talking about human resources, the plan also touched upon the attempt to reduce poverty, inequality, as well as to resolve debt problems of the public. So initially, we try to reduce the interest rate in order to lessen the burden of a household or the general public. And for example, loans for education and at least 60 million people who have borrowed these education loans must be able to go on with their life. And lots of people said that household debt is quite high in Thailand, about 90% of the GDP. However, I would like to say that this problem has happened for a long time. So the fact that it becomes higher is because our GDP is down. However, right now, in trying to solve the problem, we go deeper into details. We mobilize all agencies, whether it's about Bank of Thailand, Consumer Protection Board, as well as agency overseeing cooperatives. So we try to mobilize everyone in order to solve this problem. So we try to reduce their burden. And right now, there's also an attempt to reduce inequality by asking the NHA, the National Housing Authority, to build low-income housing and to attract foreign investors. There are interesting figures, one of which that I would like to share here is about applications being submitted to the Board of Investment. And the total value right now is about 450 applications right now, compared to about 200,000 in the past year. So we think that this year the number of applications probably will be as high or even higher than those submitted pre-COVID. So this is a very good signal because it underlines the confidence of foreign or potential foreign investors. And this aligns with what I have said, that is the ecosystem that we try to put in place. And there will be new industry which will correspond to Thailand's future directions. And I believe that Thailand will be able to walk forward in the new context, reflecting the current situation of having the elderly. And this has already been reflected through BOI applications, as I have already explained. To wrap up, I have nothing to say aside from that we need to collaborate with each other. We are in the transition period. It is getting better, but this is not finished yet. We need to be prepared. There are new challenges. And as I have already mentioned in the beginning, that we are facing a new challenge of the soaring price of energy, and this could lead to higher inflation. However, the government will do the best to minimize the impact to the general public so that we can overcome this difficulty and enjoy a sustainable growth in the future. Once again, I emphasize that we need to collaborate with each other. And with regard to the opening of the country and other related issues, I believe that the Governor of Tourism Authority of Thailand will probably share that with you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Supathana Pongpanmi Chao, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy, for your keynote speech. And next, another important agency in charge of promoting tourism to Thailand. May I welcome Mr. Yuttasak Supasorn, Governor of the Tourism Authority of Thailand, to give a keynote speech, please. Good afternoon, distinguished guests. First of all, let me thank the Bangkok Post for giving me the opportunity to join you at this forum. I'm being tasked by the Minister of Tourism to share with you the steps that we plan ahead in order to revive the tourism sector. As you all know, that tourism is a lifeline to the Thai economy, and to revive the economy going forward. If you look back to 2019, it was the golden period for Thai tourism. We were able to raise 3 trillion baht revenue, so 2 trillion baht from international travels, and we have to rely on high quality travels, and so that is about 20% of our GDP. After the pandemic hit the world, travel restrictions across the globe has devastated the travel industry, as we all know. Particularly, we relying very much on tourists from abroad, and that's why we have to put in extra efforts in order to reopen our country. And as you know, the government under the leadership of the Prime Minister, let me go to the next slide. The government is committed to reopen the country, and the Prime Minister has said that we will reopen Thailand in 120 days. The statement was given on the 16th of June this year, and if you look in the boxes, you'll see that if tourists can come to Thailand without quarantine restrictions, those who are fully vaccinated can stay to the Phuket Sandbox. And we were able to do that. We were able to introduce Phuket Sandbox scheme on the 1st of July, and we were able to add Samui and Got Tau and Phangan Island on the 15th of July, and then extend the Phuket Sandbox to link it with Krabi and Phanga later on the 16th of August. And the CCSA as resolutions on the 30th of July, we were able to add extra destinations in 12 provinces that will be reopened. So unlocking these areas in the country in the third phase with the introduction or the resumption of We Travel Together promotion to stimulate domestic tourism, which will start registering on the 15th of October to be implemented from the end of this month until until January next year. So Samui, Phang Nga, Krabi have already been added to Phuket Sandbox in the piloting period. And in the first phase, between the 1st and 30th of November, new areas will be added, mainly tourist centers, including Bangkok. I believe that 19 provinces are added. And then in the second phase, more provinces will be added to the list. And these provinces represent over 15% of the tourism revenue, and they are also bordering some of our neighboring countries as well. Which area will be reopened depends on the readiness at two levels. One, the readiness to contain the outbreaks, including the vaccine rollouts among vulnerable groups. At least vaccine coverage has to be sufficient for herd immunity. And two, the number of new infections, 5 to 10 new infections per 100,000 people per day, including in order not to overwhelm the medical and public health infrastructure. And we also have to take into account the cooperation we receive from the public-private sector as well as businesses. There must be emergency response plan put in place in order to safeguard the health and safety of the public. And there has to be the health emergency operation center set up. So all these steps have to be in place to determine if any area can be reopened. Let's say that a province is ready, then they may be able to reopen. But during the first phase, if a province is not ready, do not have these measures in place, if we cannot reassure or restore confidence of the local population as well as visitors, those provinces will have to put back their reopening plan. And we also designate certain areas as blue zones, meaning that different SOPs will be implemented. For example, we are having red zone or dark red zone, like Bangkok in the dark red zone. There are certain activities that are allowed or not allowed in order to contain the outbreaks. But if an area is designated as tourism promotion area on the basis of public health and safety, the provincial disease control authorities will be empowered to implement different sets of measures in order to contain or to maintain stringent health and safety issues, including, as I mentioned, that if you are designated as a blue zone under the TAT definition, we want to create safe zones or safe bubbles where people can travel across these zones. So blue zones meaning business and leisure ultimate experiences that we can create for those visiting these blue zones. Because post-COVID, travelers will try to seek unique travel experience. And so these blue zones are designated to restore confidence amongst travelers and at the same time to ensure that they will receive great experiences coming to these areas. And we hope that piloting this blue zone will be able to help us bring back normalcy to businesses and to bring back the how we can spend our daily life back to pre-COVID area. So the next step after Phuket sandbox, Phuket will embrace this idea to become Phuket Blue Zone. And in the future, we hope to add more blue zones around the country, enabling local people as well as foreign tourists to travel safely across the country. The next point I'd like to share with you is that how are we going to drive the revival of tourism post-COVID? As I mentioned that this situation is unprecedented. We were so successful with tourism. Tourism contributes to 20% of the GDP. And with the outbreaks, we have to plan ahead how can we transform the sector in order to sustainably growing this industry further. And pre-COVID, we have 39.8 million tourists coming to Thailand. And last year, we only achieved the revenues of only about 8 billion baht because of the closures of the borders and the restrictions in international travels. And we believe that that was the lowest point. And before new outbreaks came about at the end of last year until early this year, and with the peak number of infections in April, so several projects that we had planned to launch had to be pushed back to this month, to October. So based on the projection of the revenues for this year, and we projected that domestic travel will be 60 million per person times, and we may be able to see 100,000 foreign travelers coming, raising about 320 billion baht. So this probably represents the lowest point, and we should be over the worst from now on. From 2.99 trillion baht revenues 2 years ago. So I believe that the worst is over, and we are now looking ahead, and we hope that 2022 we want to see at least 50% of the revenue raised pre-COVID when compared to pre-COVID, and a year after that, 2023, we want to achieve 80% of the revenue we received back in 2019, but the number of arrivals may be decreased, like maybe 20 million foreigners visit Thailand, but it means that the quality will be higher. So we want to transform the sector. We want to minimize the negative impact on the environment. We do not want to see mass tourism, but we want Thailand to become the world-class destination. So safety and less well-explored destinations have to be developed, but the tourists, the travelers will be more willing to pay. And so how can we respond to the changing travelers' behaviors? And so this represents an opportunity for Thailand to undertake some transformative shift in the tourism sector. We want to rely on the domestic market. The 60 million people in Thailand will have to help promote the tourism industry, plus 100,000 foreign visitors who are entering Thailand today. So in order to revive the sector, we have already set the direction going forward. We know that the recovery may be uneven, but we want to ensure on the whole that the recovery will be swift and will be sustained and that growth in the long term will be healthy. And so in the future, what we are trying to do at the moment for the future is to lay down the foundations to be the sustainable tourism, which is aligned with the government policy as well as the draft National Development Plan, the 13th plan to increase value added to tourism activities and businesses. And that's why TAT under the Ministry of Tourism has already set the direction in order to ensure swift recovery and to make early gains. First, we have to support the tourist operators to be able to run their business quickly, to provide vaccines and to support them in their efforts to get certification for their health and hygiene service. And we also need to restore their credit lines as well as to up their skill or retraining the staff in Phuket. For example, how can we ensure that businesses can be restored to provide employment so that tourism will continue to be the main activity, economic activity supporting the Thai country. If you look at domestic market, we made fewer than 3 trips per year. So how can we increase the number of trips? How can we make the trips more frequent for local population? Of course, the lowering purchasing power might be an impact as a result of COVID-19. So maybe per trip, people will spend less, but they'll make more trips per year. It may lead to increased revenues and to strengthen the local economies. If you look at China as an example, they may not hurry to reopen the country, but they look at the domestic market as the key driver. But in Thailand, our population may not be in such a great number. But post-COVID-19, how can we increase the role of domestic travel to reduce our reliance on international travel market for the time being, and at the same time to sharpen our competitive edge going forward? And secondly, to gradually open Thailand in phases, and we have managed to do so with great success. Over the past 3 months, we have seen 100,000 travelers, and we were able to see the average spending of tourists about 61,000 baht per day, per person. And this has been a result of the gradual relaxations of lockdown and quarantine requirements. So these are some of the empirical evidence to suggest that this has been successful. And from this, we can see that only 0.3% of the travelers are tested positive in Phuket sandbox. So the transmission of COVID from foreign travelers to local people or from local people to international travelers have not happened. And so the quarantine period has been reduced from 14 days to 7 days to minimize the burdens of the travelers. If they agree to the testing, both the RT-PCR as well as the ATK test. So with the success of Phuket Sandbox, we are able to introduce new areas. Let's say next year we are able to achieve 80% of the revenues with 60% of the number of tourist arrival. As the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, 4 groups of tourists will be prioritized, namely wealthy tourists, including digital cryptocurrencies and pensioners, and digital nomads, or those who are able to work anywhere in the world. If we are able to bring at least 1 million of them, and each of them can spend 300,000 baht per person, we will have quite a large number of money inside the country.
And if we look at long stay tourists, they are quality tourists that we would like to see. And who are they? For example, Millennium Active Silver, they have both money and time, and they can help stimulate the Thai economy. And in terms of behavior, they are tourists for wellness and medical services, and for each person the spending is at least 100,000 baht. So if we can attract one tourist for medical purpose, just one person, they can replace 2 conventional tourists. So there is a possibility if we focus on the quality tourists, those with high purchasing power, as well as those who would like to travel and at the same time are concerned with environmental situations. They would like to do something good. So this is areas that we can do and try to do the ease of traveling, make the traveling easier, and target on the those who have high purchasing power. The next issue is to create different experience. One thing that the Thai government has usually said is that value should come before volume, or quality before quantity. And the implication is that values may not be limited to just spending, but we need to make them feel impressed by traveling into our country through the Thai hospitality. So this is something that we can do. For example, right now we are collaborating with Ministry of Public Health to do the SHA, the Safety and Health Administration, in order to underline our priority, which is the safety, and we can convince countries abroad that whenever your people come here, you can be confident that your people are safe. So I think this is very important, having the right target tourists under the slogan of now even more amazing for Thailand. In the past, we have the slogan for amazing Thailand, right? So now even more amazing, and this is reality. A lot of people called me, and then they said that they went to the provinces and go to the sea. The sea is so beautiful. So how can we conserve the nature and that's why we need to convey these experiences to various channels. So how can we make others be confident with us? And this involves marketing communication. So the final issue is how the way forward, or how to transition ourselves. The Prime Minister has already said that we need to change, we need to readjust our image, and if we think that the worst is already over and we have a target that we will come back, that is 50% of the revenue in 2019 and 80% 2 years from now of the 2019's revenue. So how are we going to change? We need to apply technology in the tourism sector. We need to emphasize quality tourism. We need to increase values, and we need to talk about high tech, and we need to exploit or leverage the technology or in order to attract those with high purchasing power. So what is going to be the change post-COVID? I think it will depend on digitalization, responsible tourism, and the government's policy to increase long-term competitiveness of the country. So I would like to tell you that we will focus at quality. We will pay attention to safety, the environment. We will leverage the technology. So as a starting point for us for the Thai tourism sector to bounce back, the CCCA in the latest meeting approved in principle to declare 2022 as the Visit Thailand year, now even more amazing. And this is going to integrate all sectors also in order for the Thai tourism to bounce back in a sustainable manner. So if we underline the change on the basis of safety and environment and others, so we, the TAT and Ministry of Tourism and Sports, we are confident that we can come back, and the tourism system will remain the driving engine of the Thai economy. Yet we need collaboration from businesses, and we hope that next year we will be able to see the bouncing back of the Thai tourism sector.
You have heard the two keynote speakers. We are now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and we are more confident that the Thai economy has gone through and the worst is over. And next year will be promoted as Visit Thailand Year 2022, now even more amazing with effective COVID-19 containment measures. So I'd like to thank Mr. Yuttasak Supakon from the Tourism Authority of Thailand.
The private sector has also participated to help Thailand as well. And now we are joined by Mr. Abel Teng, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Huawei Technologies Thailand Company Limited, and he has something for all of us as well.
Swadikap. Your Excellency Mr. Supan Thanaphong, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy, Mr. Vorachai, Vice Chairman, BangkokPost Public Company Limited, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful and honored to be invited to the BangkokPost Forum 2021. I would like to share with all of you some insights about the role and importance of the new technologies like 5G, cloud, and AI to build a resilient Thailand in the post-pandemic era. As we all know, in the past 1.5 years, the epidemic has profoundly affected people's lives, business sectors, and also the whole humanity society. However, the one thing that remains unchanged is that the human being's exploration into the future. As we see, humans are born to explore. We can see this in the handprints left behind throughout history. The first is a handprint saved in a cave painting thousands of years ago. As Picasso said, there is no past or future in art, only amazing beauty that lives on today. The second picture is about an X-ray of a woman's hand. When a curious young physician discovered X-rays for the first time, one of his first pictures was his wife's hand, showing off their wedding ring. And the third is a digital handprint in the metaverse. We all know the metaverse is now very hot and popular. Where the metaverse will combine biometric features and digital information, creating unlimited possibilities for the future intelligent world. With this exploration spirit, the dreams of yesterday are the inventions of today. Over 2,400 years ago, Chinese philosopher Mozi described the vehicles we drive today. That's amazing. And Da Vinci designed the aircrafts even 500 years ago, far earlier than the real aircraft invented. One of the fathers of science fiction even predicted the video calls for more than 100 years ago. And we can see the curve below that. It shows all the fantastic and the major technologies the human beings invented for the past thousands of years with the spirit of exploration and inspirations. So we can see, without exploration, there will be no dreams, no inventions, and no social progress. As we see, COVID-19 unfortunately closed many doors, but innovation opened a new window of hope. Through these windows, we can peek into the future world. 2 weeks ago, Huawei company launched the Intelligent World 2030 white paper after 1 year's research and analysis with the whole industry. For the next few minutes, I would like to share this video to introduce our insights about the technology trends into post-pandemic era. Please enjoy.
Around every object in this world, connections are forming. What kind of world will tomorrow bring? Intelligent World 2030. Unbound exploration. Unveil the future. AI will be able to predict infectious disease patterns for better epidemic response. AI will be able to target treatment, minimizing damage to healthy cells. Lighter, more portable devices will mean wider access to specialist care. Health will be computable, improving quality of life. Precision agriculture systems will build visualized data graphs. Smart vertical farms will anchor food supply chains. 3D printing will come to the dining table through low carbon meats and proteins. Turning data into green food for healthy, inclusive nutrition. Digital remote storage plus automated delivery will make our homes more livable. Intelligent building management will bring us closer to zero carbon habitats. Smart homes will become truly intelligent, understanding and providing exactly what you need. New interactive experiences make for more human spaces. Autonomous driving will turn your vehicle into a mobile third space. More vehicle sharing will mean faster, low-carbon transport. Smart, low-carbon transport puts the world at our fingertips. Healthcare, food, living space, transportation. We believe in technology forging a brighter future.
After watching this fantastic video describing how the future world will be for us, I think we have some ideas about how the ICT and the digital technologies will address the challenges we face and describes the new opportunities that await organizations and individuals to explore and defines the future lives and societies we're going to have. So to meet these needs, we have set 8 directions for explorations, including health, food, the living spaces, transportation, the cities, the enterprises, the new energies, and also digital trust. So we expect that in 2030, we'll be able to identify potential health problems, shifting the focus from treatment to prevention. And also driven by the IoT and AI and the cloud technologies, the precision medical solutions will become a reality in the future. In 2030, the vertical farms that are not affected by climate will enter into our lives. With the 3D printing, it will make it possible for people to create artificial meat so that we can even turn data into the green food for all of us. Our homes and offices will become zero carbon buildings. The next generation IoT technologies will build adaptive home environments that understand all our needs and make it really intelligent and smart. The new energy vehicles will become the third mobile space. The new aircraft will make emergency services more efficient, reducing the cost to medical supplies and change the way we communicate. By 2030, the communication networks will go beyond connecting billions of people to connecting more than billions of things. We can see the networks of 2030 will be AI native, green and low carbon, with cubic broadband, deterministic experience, harmonized communications and sensing. The network performance will continue to improve from today's gigabit access to 10 gigabit access. The broadband coverage will extend beyond the ground to the air and even to the space. So the further communication networks will support deterministic services experiences. The users will be connected to multi-level of computing resources with 1 millisecond latency in cities, with 10 milliseconds latency in city clusters, and maybe 100 milliseconds latency over the backbone networks. So the networks will also provide 5 nines availability and built as a guaranteed virtual networks to meet industry needs. There will be 200 billions of connections worldwide by 2030. The monthly cellular traffic per person will exceed even 600 gigabits, and there will be 1 billion XR users, including AR, VR, etc. This will make the virtual world and the physical world more interactive and deliver ubiquitous and hyper-real experiences. When we look at the computing, apart from the networks, besides these connections, the computing power will be the key to driving a digital future in 2030. For example, the mobile internet, cloud computing, and big data were all new things for the past 10 years. Now, there are the tools that have reshaped our societies rather than these technologies. By 2030, the general computing power will reach 3 flops. The AI computing power will exceed the 100 times flops. In the future, the digital and the physical world will come closer together. People will interact with the machines, and AI will be available everywhere. This will help industry move from digital to the real intelligent. The future computing will face physical limitations. To overcome these challenges, we will have to innovate in terms of software, architectures, and systems. And more importantly, the industry must work together to create a new foundation for computing to push the limits of semiconductors and to achieve the intelligent and green and secure computing environment. Over the next decades, beyond the connections, the computing, we will enter into a new era of low carbon, electric, and intelligent digital power world. Transforming energy structure is key to addressing climate change, as we are facing the challenges. The new renewable energies are now being commercialized, and electronic and digital technologies are being used together to create an energy cloud and manage the energy system by the data. By 2030, the solar and wind will be a major energy source. And 50% of all the electricity will be generated coming from the new renewable energy. And installed PV capacities will reach even 3,000 gigawatts. In terms of consumption, the electricity will account for 30% of global energy consumption, and 50% of the vehicles sold will be electric, and over 80% of digital infrastructures will be green. And finally, the vehicles are also becoming electric and intelligent. We predict that by 2030, autonomous vehicles will make up 20% of the Chinese market. And in Thailand, we expect that it will take even more than 15% of the total market as well. The whole vehicle computing power will exceed 5,000 TOPS. And the vehicle network transmission speed per link will also exceed 100 gigabits per second. In the future, the automobile industry will see developments in intelligent driving, intelligent spaces, intelligent services, and also intelligent operations. Huawei hopes to see and use our ICT technologies to help the car makers to build these future cars. This future will depend on our exploration and our choices from today. The next decade will be an intelligent world, changing every aspect of our lives, including our food, the living, the travel, the health, how we produce, how cities operate, and how countries flourish and develop. We believe the greatest wisdom is found in the shared ideas and in the joint explorations. We are unfortunate to have this COVID-19 outbreaking as a pandemic to the whole world, which impacted our life, our society so much. But we are also fortunate and lucky that we are now in a great era when we look forward to the outlooks of the future. The new technology trends will bring us a brilliant future lives and a future society. We're feeling excited and inspired. Huawei, as a leading ICT technologies, will also feel lucky to in this big era and this industry. 30 years ago, we decided to enter into this telecommunication and ICT industries with the mission of enrich people's life through communication. Then 10 years ago, we decided to connect every corner of the world to build a better connected world with our technologies. And now to enter into the digital world, our vision and mission becomes to bring digital to every person, home, and organization for a fully connected and intelligent world. In Thailand, Huawei started our business 22 years ago. We are so appreciated and grateful to the support and trust from our customers, from our partners, from all our employees' dedications, and also to the trust and support from the government. We continued to invest and to support Thailand's digitalization and to enrich people's life with our new leading technologies. Moving towards to the next decade, we're quite confident, we're quite inspired for all these new technology trends. And we believe that embracing these new technologies with the support and collaboration from the whole industry, we can see a brilliant resilience for Thailand economy and society. Together, we can bring this digital world to every person and home and organization for a fully connected and intelligent Thailand and leave no one behind. Please stay safe and stay healthy in this COVID-19 situation. Thank you. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you, Mr. Theng, Chief Executive Officer, Huawei Technologies Thailand Company Limited, for your contribution on this topic. Before we move on to the final part of today's event, I would like everyone to watch the video from our main sponsors, who are PTT Exploration and Production Public Company Limited and Huawei Technologies Limited Company Limited.
For the last 3 decades, PTTEP has explored with determination and produced with expertise in an ethical and transparent manner. Explore happiness and produce a sustainable quality of life. Because energy security is the beginning of every life. We will grow together for sustainable energy. PTTEP, Energy Partner of Choice.
ครูคนนี้เข้ามาสอนคอมพิวเตอร์ในโรงเรียนที่ไม่มีคอมพิวเตอร์สักเครื่องเดียวให้กับนักเรียนที่ไม่เคยเห็นมันมาก่อนในชีวิต ดิจิทัลบัสนี้จะเป็นหนึ่งในจุดเริ่มต้นของการเรียนรู้เทคโนโลยีขั้นพื้นฐานและการนำเทคโนโลยีเพื่อไปต่อยอดให้เกิดประโยชน์ได้จริงดิจิทัลบัสจะเดินทางไปทั่วประเทศไทยเพื่อมอบความรู้จากความเชี่ยวชาญที่มีเพราะเราเชื่อว่าเทคโนโลยีเป็นของทุกคนเราจึงมุ่งมั่นที่จะนำระบบดิจิทัลไปสู่ทุกคนทุกบ้านและทุกองค์กรเพื่อประเทศไทยที่เชื่อมต่อกันได้อย่างสมบูรณ์แบบ
The final highlight of the day is the discussion forum where views and business strategy outlooks are shared by business traders and organizations to restore Thailand under the topic of the On the Road to Post-COVID-19 Recovery. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Prin Panichapat, Deputy Leader and Head of the Economic Team, Democrat Party, Mr. Dilip Rajagaria, Group Chief Executive Officer, Minor International, and last but not least, Stanley Kang, Chairman from the Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce in Thailand, and myself, Warin Satudeo, as the moderator for the discussion on this topic. So let's say hello to all of our speakers. A very good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So we have first question for Kun Prin. For almost 2 years now, Kun Prin, that we have the pandemic. So do you think our economy has already passed the rock bottom? Are we on the way up? Or can we say the best is yet to come? Or have we already passed the worst scenario?
How long do I have for this question? 2 hours?
Yeah.
But it's tough. It's a tough one because I think any economist or any politicians with any sense, any logics, I think it's very hard to fathom whether we've passed the worst. I wish I could say that with hands to my heart that we have passed the worst because I see the intentions that there are efforts to ramp up the vaccinations, the doses, inoculations that's been ramped up recently. And that's a good sign. And there are more quality vaccines on board to come. And I think the government have a clear intention to open up the country more in more cities. And I think incrementally you will see relaxation of the strict regulations that we have seen enforced over the last few months that continue to edge back towards normality. Now, of course, domestic economy may not, jump or recover as fast. But to say we passed the worst, I think economically in terms of the indication, I think we have, unless there are new strands of the viruses, that are worse than the Delta. And unless, of course, we drop our guards, because I think people knows that despite the fact that we have plenty of vaccine, we still have to be mindful of some social distancing regulations, as well as wearing masks or, using gel alcohol and all the healthcare related measures, which I think will be with us for the next couple of years until we stabilize on the virus's strands front. But yes, I hope we've passed the crisis on the healthcare front. Whether we've passed the worst on the economic front is another matter.
Thank you. Moving on to Kun Stanley and Mr. Dilip. So how does a company keep a business healthy during this pandemic, which is soon going to be endemic that we have to still live with it? So how do we keep our business healthy? Mr.
I think,
Dilip, yes.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Actually, thank you for inviting me for the panel and the forum. The pandemic, which started as a humanitarian crisis, has actually now evolved into an endemic. And now we will see that very soon it will sort of cascade into an economic crisis. And we have seen the impacts in certain countries where the economy is actually suffering as a result of the pandemic. And it depends on how countries have reacted pretty quick. Actually, I'm actually in Spain at the moment today. And it's great to see the country actually coming out of the pandemic and mainly because of the speed of the vaccinations. Now, coming back to Thailand, actually, yes, the last 2 years has been tough, but actually in Thailand, it's not something which we haven't been exposed to in the past. We have gone through many pandemics. We've gone through SARS, bird flu, swine flu, MERS, you name it. And Thailand has always managed to control and come out on the other side quite strong, because Thailand has always been quite resilient. And one of the reasons, that's why we call it Amazing Thailand, which always amazes you, which is actually true. But I think as a company, this one, no one thought this will last for 2 years. It's been a global crisis or global pandemic. And basically for us, yes, it has been difficult, especially when we are exposed into 64 different countries with 550 hotels and more than 2,000 restaurants in Thailand as well. It's not been easy. It's not been an easy journey. But saying that, we were the first to jump. We actually had a head start, because our businesses in China were impacted first in January of 2020. So we learned how we control the pandemic in China, and basically when it hit Thailand and Europe and other places, we were able to control it much better. So basically, we had a project which we call the BBC, which is called Business Beyond COVID, and we actually split that into 3 different components: the short term, medium term, and the long term. And in the short term, our focus was mainly it was about health and safety of our team members, health and safety of our guests, and that was our key focus. And we developed all the health and safety issues all the health and safety measures to overcome and control and also contain the spread of the virus. We then took measures in terms of protecting the business, in terms of reducing costs. But more importantly, what we also did was we strengthened our balance sheet and our cash flow pretty quick. So we managed to raise new funding. We managed to strengthen our balance sheet. We managed to raise new cash. And I have to say that our shareholders, our investors, our team members, our banks, and also our bondholders have been very supportive, because they know Mine International has always been a resilient company. It's very agile. We move really fast, and therefore they have supported us. And then on the medium term, what we also did was we have also looked at asset rotation in terms of generating more cash into the business to protect and expand the business as well. So I think our key focus in the short term was about protecting cash, protecting our balance sheet and all. And in the medium term, we're also looking at growth. So to that effect, last year we acquired a portfolio called Boscolo Hotels in Italy, where we acquired about 8 hotels together with a fund. And now we have spread the Anantara brand into Europe. And by next year, we will have 8 new Anantaras in Europe, which is a fantastic milestone achievement for us. So whilst, I always say during a crisis, there is always opportunities, and that's how we see it. And we managed to leverage that. And in the long term, what we are looking at is the new norm, or what we call how do we embrace the long term, or what we call the new norm. And I think we need to get used to this in terms of guest preferences, changing guest behaviors, changing booking patterns, changing customer segments, and all this. And I think the hotel industry or the hospitality industry, there is a wake-up call where we have to change pretty fast, and more into digitalization and transformation becomes a key driver for this as well.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Dilip, I think we have to understand this in very relative terms, because we've been living with the pandemic for the past 2 years. So when you mention short-term, medium, and long-term, by how many months or years are we talking?
I think the short-term is gone now, because the short-term was last year. We are now in the medium term, where we are seeing recovery. We're seeing restrictions being eased. We are seeing travel patterns coming up quite strong. The pent-up demand is coming very strong, especially where countries have opened and there is a clear alignment and there is a clear direction in terms of how it's moving, which is very key. Vaccination is also key as well as part of that. And therefore, building up consumer confidence is key, and that's something which we have seen coming quite strong in Europe. I have to say, in Europe, our demand is coming very strong in certain months. In the month of August, actually, some of our hotels perform better than 2019. And people talk about, some analysts talk about, we will never get back to 2019 levels until 2024. And I don't know what sort of data points they're using, but the data points we are using are real, and it's here to stay, and it's real actual facts. In the Maldives, the demand has come back very strong, and we had the best ever December last year. In the Middle East has contained and has controlled and actually has done a fantastic job with regards to controlling or at least taking measures on the pandemic side. They never shut down in terms of the borders, and they always kept their borders open, and they've managed to come out quite strong. Demand is very strong again. So I would say, it's a shame because in the first year of the pandemic, most of the European countries, including the US, suffered the worst. In the second year, which is this year, those countries have come out quite strong because they managed to administer the vaccination program really fast. And some of the Asian countries have lagged backwards. A good example is Thailand. Thailand, we were number 1 in the index last year in terms of control of the pandemic. And this year, we are one of the worst because, we didn't take enough measures in terms of the vaccination. And we had 1 year head start to plan and to implement the best practices of some of the other countries which have done. But unfortunately, we have been slow. But again, it's never too late. And also it's nice to see that the vaccination has started and it's rolling really fast, and the measures have been taken to open sandboxes and all those things. But I think, we could have done it much sooner and much earlier, and the country wouldn't have suffered as where we are today.
Well, to cut them some slacks, I mean, no one saw the variant or the strains coming as well. So, lesson learned on that part. So, any thoughts from Mr. Stanley regarding the keeping the business healthy during the pandemic? Can I now move on to Mr. Stanley Kang for a second? Yes, Mr. Stanley.
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, that example like mine is a big group, right? But with our Chamber of Commerce, there's a lot of SMEs. So when pandemic started, we really talk to each other. I think that's the time we need to help each other. So it's very coming very suddenly and impact very seriously. Most of the big company, they have better structure, better resources, local, so that they can management is much more easily go through the pandemic. But with all the SMEs, we have working together. We discuss with the government. We discuss with a lot of financial center. I believe that Thailand, we have go through several crisis since 97 on the Dong Yang Gong crisis and 2008 with the hamburger crisis. Every 10 years it comes up a crisis, right? So after these 2-3 crises, in fact, the financial sector in Thailand is quite strong. So we really bring a lot of agenda, not just the Foreign Chamber. We also work closely with the Thai Chamber of Commerce and Board of Trade to discuss with all the financial bankers to see that how can they help to support all these SME to go through that. So of course, when pandemic comes up, we look at like the long holiday, we have been through almost 1 year and up and down, a lot of uncertainties. If you don't have enough bullet, you don't know how to make your policy or make your strategy to face all this change. It will be very challenging. So communication is very important. So in the last 1.5 years, we make a lot of communication to ensure everybody can survive through this pandemic. Of course, honestly, I have to say that not everybody can go through that. As a pandemic, it's like a health checkup, right? So if your company is quality is good, and then your management system is okay, and you do transparency, and then you really know how to management and make the change adjustment. I believe that your banker or maybe your investor, they will continue to support you. So I personally, I feel that in the last 1.5 years, so it's really a health check. So I believe until today, whoever are surviving, I think 80% should be fine. Go through the challenging already. Maybe another 1 or 2 months, they still have a little bit turbulent. But I think that whoever are still alive, they are alive. Okay. And then, but of course, with 1.5 years of the crisis, we need to do a good management done and to find out more resources to help each other. I think that period is gone already. It passed already. So next, from now on, for another, in the 2022, is really the time to prepare yourself and to make sure your competitiveness with the new technology and new environment to ensure that you can survive if from now to the future. That's what my point of view is here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. I will come back to you in a few minutes. Back to Kun Prin now. I really like Mr. Stanley's metaphor of, we were on a holiday, which is quite long. It's a long holiday. So, Kun Prin, are there any lessons learned from this pandemic and the economic downturn this time around with the pandemic, which could be a nice or recommendations for the policymakers or how we move our economy forward?
I think Kun Stanley has been very polite and very diplomatic to say that we were on holidays. Of course, to put it more bluntly, we were very complacent, and there was a lot of things that need to be transformed. Actually, even before COVID, people talk about new normal. As many of you know, there is no such a thing as new normal. Many, many new things, new technologies, the blockchain, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, 5G, big data, quantum computing, all these have been there. Even basic stuff like e-commerce and how we can transact perhaps in a digital world, the gateway, the payment, digital currencies. All these technologies have been available for the government to use to improve the ease of doing business for Thai entrepreneurs and businessmen and to the betterment of the livelihood of the Thai people. All these technologies have been there. The government should embark upon the e-government plan that was clearly laid out. They had a very good 2 years plan that was supposed to start it since last year or the year before. But the plan has not been executed nor implemented. The national strategy is a great one, the long-term 20-year strategy. That should be complemented on, but it's good on papers, but there's no delivery units. So what I would say we have learned is that COVID as a crisis have accelerated the digital transformation, have accelerated the ability for us to do the digital transformation. Because before, people say, whose job is it to do digital transformation? Is it the jobs of the CEO, the chief executive officers, the like of Dilip here, the CEO, and the CEO of the country is the prime minister. But has a CEO successfully done it? Not for many companies and not certainly for the country. Is it the job of the CTO, the chief technology officers? And you look around and not many CTO have successfully transformed their companies. So the job has been successfully completed by COVID, COVID. So once COVID come, it expedites and accelerated the whole process of digital transformation. So we've learned this the hard way. But yes, in every crisis, there's always an opportunity. And this is an opportunity, is a wake-up call for sure. There may be, for me, a new abnormals that many Thais have to grow up with or grow used to, move out of our comfort zone and perhaps be less complacent and less ego about what we think is right and what we think that we've done so well in the last 10, 15, 20 years that we can be a leader in certain areas. But the world has moved on a lot. And the knowledge-based economy, or an economy that is driven by innovation, creativity, and new technology, we have to get used to that. We can't just stay complacent and keep exporting our good stuff, like rice, tapioca, rubber, sugar, and many nice fruits. And we think that the party can continue to grow forever. Sure, the raw materials can find new markets and there are new opportunities in Africa, in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. But the ability to look at reforming or reinventing the whole production lines and the whole productivity that I think has been lacking in terms of increasing that productivity rather than just cut costs or rather than relying on FX, foreign currency, to be weak to help you export, or relying on Bank of Thailand to cut more rates, or for government, Ministry of Finance to give more handouts. We really need to look at how we invest for longer term successes. And I think COVID is a big wake-up call that we need to invest in research and development, R&D, especially in healthcare, especially in education and the long-term structural workforce that we need to improve the quality and the skill labor force that is lacking, because our workforce is unskilled. And it's not the skill of tomorrow, it's skill of today or yesteryears, at very best. So how do we engineer a new workforce that able to them to relearn, unlearn what they've learned in the past, and able to fill their heads and minds and their hearts with new inspirations for them to look into the future.
So what kind of reforms are needed to make what you just said happen really in Thailand?
For me personally, it has to start with the government itself. We have to walk the talk. And, I may criticize my own profession here, like I did when I was a banker or investment banker. I used to criticize. I think it's fair enough to criticize myself and my peers and our industry colleagues. I felt this is a job of leadership. You need a strong leadership, and you need someone who has a vision, who can see beyond short-term goals for long-term structural improvement. And in order to implement long-term goals, you need guts, and you need to perhaps take some criticism in the short term, because a lot of the politicians, were not so willing or daring to do this. And some of the things that clearly, for example, the government reform that people talk about, civil servant reforms, the KPIs, for me, you need to change there. You can't just keep the KPI on the quantity. You need to change into a more qualitative measures. And for the country, that's like GDP. Would you keep looking at gross domestic product as your milestone or your key KPI for the country? Or should we shift that into a more sustainable KPI? You can look at UN Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 goals. You can look at the environmental issue. You can look at gender equality. You can look at partnerships for all goals. You can look at various education and various forms that I think we can look at, because measurements, if you take as quantity, civil servant will not improve their KPI. They just look at how they spend their budget and protect their turf. Without collaborating or integrating the efforts. So for me, we have to reform the government and the civil servants. And secondly, follow that is the whole GovTech. How do we use new technology to reform governments and improve the ease of doing businesses? Before I came here, I was in Parliament at the commission in Parliament to adjust and change the law on commerce and how we do businesses. And sometimes we argue over minor different words and lines of how we write the rules of law or regulations. But at the heart of it, we want to really improve the ease of doing business. So when foreigners come here, they feel welcome. Thailand is a country that is rich in resources, but our strength is 0.4, not 4.0. And by that, I don't mean to be demeaning or sarcastic to anyone. 0.4 is our tradition, is our smile, is our empathy, our compassion. That's why foreigners love coming to live here. That's why Dilip is living here. Well, okay, he's gone to Spain for a while or whatever to travel the world to do the work there. But that's why Stanley is here. That's why Dilip is here. That's why Bill Heineke is here. There is something inherently good and strong about Thailand and its people. Last night, I was at a shooting site of a movie called The Greatest Beer Run. This was a new movie from a director, Oscar-winning director Peter Farrelly. He won an Oscar with A Green Book. He directed and wrote Dumb and Dumber, the Jim Carrey star. And last night, I met Russell Crowe and Zac Efron. They're in town. They're in Bangkok. They're shooting this movie in the middle of Bangkok. They just got out of Phuket Sandbox and they've complimented Phuket Sandbox, how wonderful it is, how lovely Anantara Layan is, right, Dilip? I'll collect the fee later. No, I'm joking. But, they had a great time in Phuket and they compliment, and Russell was like, it's steaming hot in Thailand, but the food is great, the people is nice, it's welcoming. Yeah. I said it in his voice, like Russell, very soft and rough. But you know what? The process of them getting to Thailand, they had to get approvals. And the process they had to go through and the pain, even for movie stars like Hollywood and Oscar-winning director, that they had to go through, even though Thailand is a hub for film shooting and production, post-production, they still have to go through a lot of paperwork and apply for visa, and COVID makes it even harder. They went to shoot to Chiang Mai and Ratburi, and the governors need to make local approval, despite the fact that they had the ministerial approval already from the tourism authority of Thailand and from the Ministry of Tourism and from Sabakor and all that. They still need to go through the local layers. So imagine all this ease of doing businesses, we want to attract the top talents and great people like Pete Ferry, Russell Crowe, and Zac Efron to come back more and more. And shooting a movie like, in Chiang Mai, Lost in Thailand, has made Chiang Mai popular among the Chinese. And so we should look at ways to welcome more quality foreigners here.
Right. We'll get back to you on the strong leadership part towards the end of the discussion. But now let's go back to Mr. Dilip and Mr. Stanley on the demand that was disrupted. So how do we see the business coming back after the COVID-19 or, the aftermath of COVID-19? How do you see these demand recovering, or what do you foresee? Maybe starting from Mr. Stanley this time?
I think that it's coming back, right? And it's very challenging. Just like Prince said that, I'm very happy to see Prince say all that, because finally the politician or the House of Representatives hear our voice and really talking about implementation right now, right? So I think COVID is the accelerator, making something that we think that going to happen in 2030. It's coming faster. So the technology, the trend are still there, never change. But things come faster. So COVID make people learn. So I always say that when God closes the door, they open another door. So can we see that trend is here? Can we move faster? So I give a word that the trend today is the technology, right? So you see, we talk about digital transformation. In the last 5 years, we talk about it, but no one listened to it. And no one really implement on that. So I believe that right now, with all this technology transformation, the digital transformation, not just the public sector, all the private sector, all the company, we have to do that. In the past, before the pandemic, maybe we don't believe that we can work from home and we can lock down, still living like well. But you look at a certain figure, you look at our stock market. Maybe when pandemic started, it's crashed down and suddenly bounced back. You look at today, we are still in a very high level. Means that in the market, in the investment market, they still have confidence where to go. You look at certain sector, certain technology company, and you are in the right trend, right? Your value keep on going up and grow very fast, right? Not just Thailand, globally, you look a lot of tech company, their value in the last 1.5 years, they only go up and grow up time to time. Of course, a certain sector, if you are not in the right trend, it's going down. We look at overall, that's good, right? So personally, I believe that there's some weaker part will be destroyed, some new part will be coming up. But people should be more focused on your technology. We talk about Thailand 4.0. You just talk about it, or you're really doing on it, right? So with the automation, digitalization, and using more technology, just like we have event today, we have forum today. We don't even believe that we can do this 1 year ago. But today become another new, I don't say the new normal, but that's a trend which you're coming to see in the 2030, but right now coming faster. At the same time, the COVID, they destroy a lot of things. So make our speed to move forward much faster. Because in the past, certain of our people used to whatever you are doing. But right now, the pandemic, the crisis just destroy all those kind of behavior. Then you to believe that something new is coming up, right? And especially like with this forum, the Deputy Prime Minister had mentioned, people look at more focus on the sustainability, right? On the ecosystem, on the green. With the climate change. So a lot of new issue is coming up. So if we can catch up all this new thing, then you still will be the leader of your business or your life, right? If not, and then you can, if you cannot make the change, you cannot fit to the new thing, then you will be out from the market. That's all my share. Thank you.
Mr. Dilip, you have already mentioned some of the recovery that's happening in other markets outside Thailand, but we were forced to be out of our comfort zone. So how do you see all the businesses recovering from this, Mr. Dilip?
Well, I think the demand disruption was pretty much driven by the pandemic. And the pandemic caused the travel just stopped overnight because of the restrictions and the various government regulations which imposed to protect the country and the people. Now, it's like almost being locked in a cattle farm, and then when the gates are open, you can imagine how the cattle will start running to water. And that's where we are today in terms of a pent-up demand. Now, if you look at, but saying that, I think the demand initially will be driven which is going to be very domestic and regional. I don't see long haul demand coming pretty quick into Thailand, for example. The main reason is the consumer confidence and the guest confidence. I think we need to do everything we can as a country to build up the confidence so that people can travel seamlessly. And as Kunpring put together really nicely, and I'm actually going through it. I'm in the middle of it now. I'm trying to come to Thailand. I am flying to Phuket next week. And you know what, the COE and the paperwork and everything you have to do, it's just monotonous. It's crazy. Like, I don't really understand why we have to do all these things when look at some of the other countries as to how they are driving demand into their country. Learn from those countries and let's implement and make what we call a seamless travel. We've always said, we need to make travel seamless. And as soon as we make travel seamless, the demand will come. And don't forget, today, it's not just the demand. Like, I think Thailand has been we've been quite lucky in the past, because the tourism numbers increased from 20 million to 25 million to 30 to 35, and we were approaching 40 million when the pandemic hit us. We cannot be complacent. We cannot be complacent and see and do nothing and say, you know what, people will still come. But we already, even pre-COVID, we started losing guests to other countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and other places as well. So Thailand needs to really revive itself and build up the destination again, build up the experiences again, build up the seamless travel, make the infrastructure, promote the product. We need to do work so that we can start to really build up that demand again. The demand will come. The demand will definitely come, and we are seeing that. But I think international demand, it will take some time. I think where we see the demand coming faster is in the transient and the leisure market. I think when you look at the MICE, or what we call the meetings, incentive, conference, and businesses, that will be slower because, these businesses have to be planned at least a year in advance. And therefore, there is a time lag. And we will see a slight delay in that demand coming back. But once the country creates the confidence, once the country makes travel seamless, once the country sort of says, you come to Thailand, even if you get COVID, you will get the best treatment. And we are the best. We have some of the best hospitals. You don't have to worry about it, and people need that confidence to be built up. And once that is done, I think the demand driver will come. The main thing we have to understand today is look at some of the past indicators. When we had the Bangkok bombings a few years ago, and even though it was a terrorism attack, actually the demand came back very strong after 6 months. We were back to normal. When we had the SARS, it took us about 6 months. When we had tsunami, it took us about 6 months. So there's always a lag of 3 to 6 months or maybe 9 months. And I think the demand will come back quite strong, provided we promote the destination carefully and provided we make it easier. Last year, I traveled in Europe, and when I came back to Thailand, again, I had to stay in Bangkok for 14 days in quarantine. It's like, you are paying to be in jail, but make that jail experience quite nice. Why can't we, whilst you are in jail or whilst you are in quarantine, why can't you have a glass of beer or a bottle of wine? Why? There's nothing that has no relevance to COVID. But you know what? We say, oh no, if you are in quarantine, no alcohol, no spa, no this, no that. And you basically have nothing apart from getting your 3 meals a day and coming out of quarantine. This is not Thailand, and this is not the experience we should be creating. So I think, but I really hope, in the coming months, we will learn from our mistakes and we will adapt to what we call the new norm, and we will adapt to what the other countries are doing. Maldives opened up as a good example in August, because if Maldives didn't open as a country, the country is dead, because they rely 100% on tourism and tourism dollars to as part of the economy. So they did open up without not many restrictions. And guess what? It was full.
Yeah. No, but Dilipji, Maldives, it's a toll. It's an island. The landscape is different. I mean, when you talk about border, and can we really compare with the bombing incident? Because we are facing the invisible enemies, and you're still talking about the variant, the strains. So how do we balance the public health and the economy in this case?
No, so there are two components to it. The public health shouldn't be driving the economy, because the public health is there to protect the people and to make sure that we contain the virus and we control the virus. And then there are the people who have to build up the economic policies to make sure that the country doesn't go into an economic crisis. Look at what's happened in Sri Lanka today. Sri Lanka has declared an economic crisis. They have gone backwards by 40 years. The food is being rationed. Everything is come to a standstill, and the country is in an absolute chaos. We don't want that happening in Thailand. So how can we avoid that? So there is one element of protecting the humanitarian side and making sure that the people are safe, and then we vaccinate people, and we at least create 70-75%, and then have herd immunity and open up the economy. And then there's another segment where we have to think about how we're going to strengthen the economy, and how we're going to look at, the new demands or the new patterns which are emerging, and I can tell you, the bigger companies, yes, they are quite strong and all those things, but, everyone is suffering the same. Yes, the smaller companies are a little bit more hostile and it's a bit more difficult for them to survive. But at the end of the day, we all need to survive as a group to revive the economy, create the jobs, bring in the foreign exchange, and promote the country again.
Absolutely. Speaking of economy, let me go back to Bryn. Is he back? I saw he was off for a while. Are you back, Bryn? Yes. Okay, great. So speaking of economic recovery and rehabilitation, now that we had the really worst few months on the economy that took its toll, so what are your concerns when you talk about economic recovery and the rehabilitation?
The biggest concern on the economic front for me is the problem on inequality, which has always been there, but has been amplified by the COVID crisis. You will see many people become more unemployed, and actually unemployment has already begun to pick up before the COVID hit us. As I mentioned, there are the processes within the digital transformation that has led to the loss of jobs in many companies and industries. But it has also created a many number of new jobs in the industries of tomorrow. Now, the question is, has the Thai workforce ready to shift from the old industry, the old models of businesses into a new one? Clearly not. And these problems will be amplified as we go through the COVID crisis, even though the handling of the actual virus infections may reduce in terms of number of deaths and also number of people getting infected once we have all the vaccines in place. But the actual transformation will be a difficult one. And this is the one where not a single job of each, and not each ministry or one ministry can handle it. It's each and every ministries have to help and integrate this effort. In fact, this should be the real national agenda, how we tackle the lack of skilled laborers in our labor force. And we are growing into an aging society, as you all know. Aging society can be exciting, can provide many businesses opportunities for the country. Some people call it in a very nice way the silver economy, like how the silver hair can provide more opportunities for the health and wellness and all this, which again, Dilip knows all about it because Anantara has been one of the pushing this for all the health and wellness. But a lot of people hasn't quite understand how they would change and transform themselves. So I think the assistance is needed here. Secondly, I mentioned before that we cannot do things the way we did the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Yes, we can still export. Yes, agriculture products can still be heroes, can still be the backbone of the country. But we have to look at how these crops can be processed and transformed into higher value added products. So I'll give you an example. During the COVID crisis, where many countries rely on food security, food safety, and also on medicines, the Thai herbs and all these whether it's Pha Thalai Joan, whether it's Kachai, whether it's garlics and various forms of Thai herbs. This has been in advancement in hundreds and perhaps thousands of years, the formula for all these Thai herbs to be mixed. But how do we get them to scale up and to have the brand and have the become a medicines and the branded the medicine? There's a listed firm on the stock exchange of Thailand called Mecca We Care, which is owned by Kirit Shah. And again, he's a Thai Indian, but I also wish that there are more Thai businessmen or more businesses that would look at this trend and help SME and startup scale up. So the likes of Apai Pubed can help themselves scale up. Thirdly, and one of the most important things why inequality is still huge is because competition here is not thriving. And what I mean by that is that in order for us to have creativity and innovation and all the new stuff to prosper, you need competition to be free and fair. At the moment, regulations are a little bit, I would argue, tilting towards the incumbents, towards the oligopoly or the monopoly. So how do we, nothing wrong with being big corporates. There are many big corporates who have social responsibility, who help the social enterprise, who have a CSR at their hearts and, have a strong DNA for good corporate governance. That's fine. But on the other hand, there are also many big corporates or industries that are having corporates who are, monopoly that impact the local economy. And this in turn hurts the startups, the SMEs, and they cannot grow. They cannot move up the ladders or scale up in a proper way if the rule of law on competition law is not being enforced, implemented. So I think this is very important when you see the big platform. And again, Dilip would know all this well because the biggest gainer from the tourism industry is not Dilip nor Minor Group. It is the big platform, the likes of Airbnb, the Booking.com, the Agoda. Yes, they play an important middleman role, but they're charging, perhaps a nice juicy fee. Are they paying tax in Thailand? Is Airbnb adhering to the local strict law and regulation on public buildings? It's interesting how Grab as well was illegal or gray area until the recent regulation legalized Grab before legalized cannabis or legalized the use of various things. And, even interestingly, Bitcoin or digital asset has been legalized before Grab, which has been more widely used. So I think regulation need to be more vibrant or more open or more understanding on the ease of doing business, as well as creating a free and fair competition. For media, Bangkok Post also noticed, your competition is not the Nation or various Thai newspaper, but the likes of Facebook, Google, YouTubes, and various channels. But these channels are not paying tax in Thailand. So for me, the challenge for me is how do you tax properly and redistribute those tax in a more better fashion, because the country is gearing up more, meaning that we are going to borrow more, and you already see the legislation going to the new session of Parliament coming up next month. To increase the level of ceiling of debt to GDP level from 60% to 70%, which is the right way to do it. But how do we productively use those, the cash from the borrowing to increase the productivity, improve the skill sets of the Thai labor force, as well as having a competition law that is free and fair, and making sure that the states are staying out of it, meaning that state-owned enterprise or the state should not compete with the private sector. They should engineer and help the ease of doing business climate, not to compete with the private sector.
Are you hopeful with all the bureaucracy and the red tapes and the Thai politics that this ceiling that is being raised will be the way that you want it to be?
Very good question. Very good question. That's a tough one because the record is not so good. The track record shows that in the old days, I used to respect the National Economic and Social Development Board, NESDB, Sapapat. It used to be highly respected. I mean, the people there's still some good people there, but the problem now is that create another layer of approval for some of this project, and if you cannot disburse or increase the speed of disbursement, there will be problems because there's a bottlenecks, and the bottlenecks often create problems. I understand they want to make sure that there are good projects. I want to make sure that the government procurement is clean and fair and transparent and able to scrutinize the project so that no corruption occur. That's fine. I mean, that still needs to be done, but that should not be at the expense of the good projects being executed and implemented in an orderly and speedy fashion. Because when you come to Parliament to ask for borrowing, especially in a special legislation in the emergency decree like is being done, it means that you must have projects in mind already on what you want to spend the money for. You shouldn't you should not be not ready. If you ask for emergency decree to be passed in Parliament to increase the level of debt ceiling and also borrow more, it means that you better know what you want to spend the money on. So hopefully those have been well thought of and planned and screened. Therefore, we don't need another extra layer in the government sector and the public sector to slow down all this. And this is what the Budget Bureau and various departments within the Ministry of Finance need to get hold of and speed up the disbursement rate, which I think will be very important, as well as you say correctly, measure the success of those projects that they spend the money on.
Thank you, Prin. We'll come back to you. Let's now move back to Mr. Dilip and Mr. Stanley on the business sector. I asked Prin about the lesson learned on the economy side, but what about the business sectors? Are there any lessons learned during this pandemic, and will it affect the corporate strategies moving forward when we talk about the negative aspects? And you also mentioned that there's always opportunities during the crisis. So how will it be? How will it be played out after this? The lessons learned from the pandemic. Mr. Dilip?
Okay, sure. I think what we see is the pandemic, as Prin rightly pointed out, and it was music to my ears to hear that, we are looking at, standardizing and making sure that the rules and governance are going to be implemented in terms of the hospitality sectors. And some of the likes of Airbnbs or the OTAs, who have no investment in the country, who don't pay any taxes, and don't employ much resources and all those things. And the money is taken out and the money is not reinvested in the country. Whereas as hoteliers today, we have the largest investment in our hotels. We are employing thousands of people. We are training them. We are creating talent, and we are also developing the country, and we're moving the economy, the needle ahead. And it's good to see at least some measures being brought together to control this. And we have been lobbying this with the government for the last so many years, but we haven't had much progress. But coming back to the business, what we call the business strategy, I think the pandemic has uplifted what we call the importance of corporate strategy role today. And what does it mean? It has actually, there are two things to that. And what we see is, like what Prin was saying, one is what we call the digital transformation, which I think it's key in terms of driving the future to balance the long-term versus the short-term strategy. And the other one is what we call the CTO function, or we call it the Chief Transformation Officer. And, I think those two roles will become important, and also to make sure that we balance the long-term actions to make sure that, we don't do anything in the short term which will compromise our long-term vision. I think it's important to build up the long-term vision, but making sure that we take the right steps to really build up the long-term vision of the corporate strategy. And also, like what we see is to embrace what we call the uncertainty by planning for multiple alternative future functions. So basically, in our business, we always say expect the unexpected, and control the ones which are controllable, and don't worry about the things which you can't control, and don't break your head about the things which are not controllable. Because if you keep stressing yourself about the ones you cannot control, I think the business will go down. So make sure that you take into account the factors you can control, and make sure you build up the long-term corporate vision to sustain the business, grow the business. And it's not about cost cutting, it's about growth. And to make sure, like, how do we grow the business in a very sustainable way, which is quite important. So I think that's where I would see that the corporate strategy becomes a vital driver in terms of planning this in the future. And this is something, it's not something new. The businesses have been doing it in the last so many years. But actually, the crisis, or what we call the pandemic, has also now triggered people to think in different ways. We are thinking about smart labor planning. We are thinking about, how do we create guest experiences even much more better based on the new trends. Like say, for example, like Pring was saying, we are moving fast on the wellness side because we feel that the wellness in the future is going to be another milestone or a pillar for growth as well. We're moving fast on the guest expectations. Even during the pandemic, we actually brought tutors to our hotels and we were tutoring the kids. It was fantastic because the parents will stay what we call the staycation or the workcation, and the kids are able to study and follow their lessons and do their studies, whilst the husband can also work and then play a round of golf or have a glass of wine. So I think these are things, some of the new trends which have emerged. And also the booking is becoming very, very last minute now. So I think we all need to be quite mindful and not to panic and say, oh, we're not going to have enough bookings for this month. And it's going to happen because that is a new trend. So we need to cope with these new trends and the demand patterns and to make sure that we build up the business model which will actually take into account these key drivers in order to drive that.
In other words, getting used to disruption, I would say. Mr. Stanley, any thoughts on the lessons learned on the business sector, Mr. Stanley?
Yeah, thank you. I think that we will never go back to life like 2019. So like Prince say, like we have analyzed that this COVID is an accelerator, makes things come faster and help to they also destroy a lot of job opportunities there. Let's see that this pandemic, we believe that at least will go to 3 years. So right now it's almost 2 years gone. So another 1 more year, we got to find out a way to replan and restructure up, right? And we look at that Thailand. I always say that the key point is open mind, open society. Which open our door much easily. Then people coming easily. So we talk about ease of doing business or doing business more easily, right? Through all this technology implementation, we can make our life much more easily. Just like we have this forum in this digital platform, much easily. We don't have to travel. We can use all this technology. So how can we bring the visitor and investor coming back into the country, right? With more easy way. And I think that you look at the new trend there, it's much more like e-commerce, internet, the 5G is coming, right? So with this pandemic, more technology is applying in our business and our life, right? So that is the trend and providing a better service. So technology, service, and all this internet is for sure. That's the future there. And how can we bring them into our business, our life, and both the government, public sector, and private sector, we have all working together and then to create that. One, the real thing there, when we talk about 5G, a lot of AI is coming. And by this technology, they were changing a lot of jobs. A lot of unnecessary job, labor job will disappear already, right? So especially pandemic helping that, making that even faster. So the real thing we have to think about how we reskill and upskill our people in the country, right? To ensure that we can bring in the new technology, new people, and new investment coming to here. Now we are not thinking that how to reduce the cost anymore. We're thinking that with the Thailand, our national competitiveness, can we have a lot of talent here to ensure that we are fitting to the future trend? So I always say that, in fact, a lot of our supply chain, we don't have enough labor. So we have import a lot of migrant labor into Thailand, right? But instead of bringing a huge quantity of migrant labor, why you don't change our concept? On those kind of labor issue job, can we use the new technology, use AI, automation, and robotic to replace that? At the same time, we still have to keep our policy to be open to attract all the talent into Thailand, right? Not just the rich silver generation. How can we attract all the young generation coming to Thailand? I always have an ambition that can Thailand, we work together, become the Silicon Valley of Asia, right? To attract all the young talent here. Greenpeace knows that we even cannot find a good good venture capital here. Right? All the venture capital have to land themselves in Hong Kong and Singapore, but all the operation in Thailand. So we are still pushing for the service liberalization. If we can do more service liberalization to bring more new company, better technology company coming to Thailand, I believe that will be the future. Take this opportunity. Let's really do something to make sure that ingesting our growth, our economy for the new trend. Thank you.
Mr. Stanley, continuing with the challenges, because you have already laid out all the opportunities ahead, but what do you see as the challenges for the next year as we're on the path to recovery?
I think that everything is reform right now. So within this, even in our corporation, that we're thinking how to create more value. What be the trend? What should we do? Right. So we can see that sustainability is there. Right. People don't come in here because you are cheap, but you got to create your value there. So we believe that a lot of things that sustainability and new thinking, like a better environment, like a green business, that's all the trend we have to go to. Right. And circular economy. In the past we talk about it. But do we really implement that? But so I think that the corporate in Thailand, we should think about how we create more value, right, for our consumer, for our society, right? So like the government don't all put the regulation. But some people they told us we look at regulation just like look at the COVID, right? COVID don't even come to Thailand at the beginning, right? So I think that the reduce the regulation, make sure that more easier doing business, easily, and everybody had to see the competitiveness. Because one word is very important for everybody, the speed, right? When the 5G era comes, right, everybody fight with the speed, right? Security, speed, and the value creating is very important. If we don't have good policy to open the country, much more easy for people to come in, and then people will not come. We will not bring all this new technology. We will not bring all this young generation, good people, good talent into here. And then how can our young people here to have opportunity here? I always say that we have a lot of young people in Thailand, and the family after they graduate, they send to abroad. But do they have a good job for them to return to the country, right? So we got to create a better job. COVID have been destroyed a lot of job opportunities there. It's a time we got to work together to create much more valuable and good job in the near future.
Anything to add on to that, Mr. Dilip, for the challenges that you foresee ahead?
I think Kun Stanley has covered it in a very nice way. I think it's important not only creating jobs, but also training is also it becomes quite important. Like, I think one of the things we did in Thailand, and this was before COVID, is that we felt that, the Thai people, they are fantastic in terms of hospitality. Hospitality comes from their heart. It's not a job. They're great people. And as Kun Pring said, Thailand was a fantastic place to live. And I've never regretted living in Thailand, even for 1 second. So now what does that mean? Now, in the past, because Thailand was never, ruled by any country. Like, Thailand's always been an independent state. And therefore, the Thai people had no motivation to even to learn English and to be quite strong on the language side, compared to countries like Philippines or Vietnam or other places where, they're much more, the English is much more of a stronger language. So what we did was, a few years ago, with the support of the government, we actually created a world-class hospitality school, which is the AIHM, Asian Institute of Hospitality Management, together with La Roche, which is one of the best hospitality schools in Switzerland. So we brought the best to Thailand. And in terms of why did we do that? And the main reason we did that was to create talent, to develop our own talent, and to build up our own talent base in terms of training, in terms of developing, and also creating that talent pool in Asia, because not many people in Asia can afford to go to Switzerland, to study. So we brought the hospitality school to Thailand to make sure that we promote it and we educate and we create that hospitality training where we can now, as a country, also start to export our talent outside as well. not only importing talent, which we do always, but also exporting talent is also important as well. And look at Philippines today. Most of the Filipinos are working outside the Philippines, and that generates enough foreign exchange, and also it also helps with the economy as well. But also, I think for us, the main factor is to create that talent pool and to cultivate the talent and to train them. So I think in terms of recovery, I think this will be a key factor as well. I think the biggest thing is I believe that the demand will come quite strong as long as we make. There are a few key factors, and which are quite easy in terms of implementation. One is vaccination. So the key is vaccination. So vaccinate.
Okay.
And make the country safe, so that the country is safe before we actually start to accept people coming from outside. That is key. The second one is to make also travel experience seamless. So as I come back into Thailand, make it easier for me. I love to come to Thailand and make it easier, in terms of the documentation and what we have to do. I am flying to London tonight. I'm in Spain today. And guess what? When I fly to London, I don't have to carry anything in terms of paperwork. I only need to carry my COVID test and a locator form which says where I have been. That's it. So why don't we practice the same in Thailand? But when I come to Thailand now, I have to do a COE. I have to show an insurance. I have to show insurance.
Yep.
I have to the list of the paperwork.
Yes, Mrs. Dilip. Yes. Yep.
So I think that is key for us in terms of attracting that travel to come back and to create that demand back into Thailand. So I hope we are getting there slowly, but I hope we can make it faster. And for me, even though some people say that the demand is going to be slow, I think the demand will come up quite fast.
Kun Prin, so on a bigger picture, Kun Prin, do you buy the economic projection cut by the World Bank, which has cut it down to 1% for the economic growth for Thailand? Or what's your forecast? What's your projection?
I think it's unfair to make any sensible projections at the moment. I mean, of course, if you look at last year, many economists were projecting very different economic growth forecasts for this year, and they had to slash, to cut and change. So I think in a situation where we're still uncertain whether there will be new strands of the viruses, and whether there will be new vaccines that will be effective for those new strands, I don't think any sensible economist can say with any certainty of what the economic growth number will be. I think, yes, I agree with Dilip that recovery can be faster than many has anticipated. But I'm also concerned whether that recovery will be uneven or bring about the inequality issues. Yes, there'll be many corporates, and I'm sure Minor Group will lead a very strong recovery. The reason why I'm concerned is because I noticed the grassroots economy still needs a more timely support from the public sector in order to engineer for that recovery to be even. And that needs assistances. I'm not worried so much about the big headlines number on the GDP forecast, or I'm not so worried about the net profit growth of the SET, Stock Exchange of Thailand, top 100 companies. They will be fine. They will recover very fine. And many companies actually will benefit from this COVID crisis. And, they would have shift and change strategy and be very smart about it. And that's great. And that's why Thai stock market is attractive to invest in. But there will be a few people who feel that they are definitely left behind. And as a country, we shouldn't be too worried about being left behind because we are already last on many of the measures around the ASEAN region, whether it's education on the PISA index, whether it's environment. So for me, I am more optimistic for growth next year. I'm also hopeful that I think this wake-up call would mean that the allocation of resources will go to the right people, hopefully, and especially the ones who've been impacted by this crisis, because there are many businesses like the fitness companies, there are night economies, bars, restaurant at night, who haven't had, and the tourism industry, who didn't really get a proper, sufficient payouts from the governments or assistance monies, and it's been a blanket kind of a support in assistance. But I think the government needs to be more focused and use this assistance money in a more productive fashion, and that's what I'm concerned about going forward. And lastly, on the concern point and for recovery, the tension abroad in terms of geopolitics is picking up the volume. And of course, while domestic concern at home, we have our own political concern and tension, but we must also play a proactive role on the foreign front, even though our focus may be domestic for the time being. But we need to create a generation of new diplomats who would have a progressive mindset that position Thailand in the world economy. And this is all about global mindsets, that there are capable people who can be UN Secretary General, who can grow up in United Nations work or international organization. We need to create a ties who can have this a regional leadership. And you see many trade deals, whether it's CPTPP, whether it's RCEP that we have passed. And we need to know that, the Ministry of Commerce, Kun Jurin Laksanavisit, is actually very proactive on this to get the trade deals abroad. And I think we need the human resources capable to do that as well.
Thank you, Prin. Well, we are already out of time. We have used all our time. So in closing, anything you'd like to leave in closing, Mr. Dilip, Mr. Stanley?
I think in closing...
yes, please.
Maybe Mr. Stanley first, yes?
Stanley, please.
I think on my part, I think that just like Kun Prin said, that I'm not too worried about all the big company. They're very strong. Thailand's company and Goping all is quite very strong. But I would like more focus look at all the SME. Because don't forget, 90% of the quantity in Thailand on the business sector are the SME. So we should give a good policy how to rebuild and regrowth and retrain up our SME into the right trend. So that would be really hard of the future of the company, right? So that if the SME can be rebuilt and regrow in the right trend, and that will be one of the way to reduce the inequality there. I'm also very worried about inequality because when inequality is happening too much, and our political stability will be challenging there too. So that focus, the certain things that will be go well and will be rebound very fast, a lot of opportunity there. And a lot of the small minor group that we have to really look at them to make sure that they do have the good resources that to help them to rebuild it up. And then we will get a stability economic and moving forward together for Thailand. Thank you.
Mr. Dilip, in closing?
Well, I think, as Thailand is emerging out of the pandemic, I think it's important that Thailand builds up a vision in terms of the future to balance the big corporates, the SMEs, to make sure that everyone cherishes in the economy. Because I think it's important that the whole country, we lift the whole country up, not just the top, but not just the bottom, but the whole economy. I think we need to come up with the roadmap in terms of how we can do it, come up with some stronger policy decisions in terms of how we can support the sector. And I think it needs to be by sector as well, which is quite important because some sectors have been affected badly. Some sectors need investment in terms of infrastructure, logistics, and all those things if we have to compete on the world stage. And I think Thailand can easily do that. Thailand, I have seen, I think people are not scared to work. People want to work. In the old days, Thailand had the lowest unemployment in the world. I think we need to build up that economy. We'll need to build up our people. We need to build up our brand, and we need to build up the talent so that Thailand in the future will sustain itself and continue to grow the way we have grown in the past. Thai baht has always been strong in spite of all the ups and downs in the past years. So I think again, the building up of the economy is going to be the key driver in the future, but it needs to be done carefully, and we need one voice. I think it's important that we have one voice, not many voices coming and create confusion all the time. There needs to be one voice, there needs to be one policy which is going to drive the economy in the future. And if we don't, because today, as we can see, even the mature countries have gone into, look at what's happened today in Europe. There's a crisis. The inflation is going up. The fuel prices have gone up. the labor, they don't have enough labor. There's a crisis in terms of shortage of labor. In London, we don't have enough people there's a fuel shortage because we don't have enough truck drivers. We cannot open our restaurants in London because we don't have enough people to work there.
Yep.
So again, we need to make sure we don't have the same issues in our part of the world and be proactive and make sure we build up a stronger economic platform so that we can deal with these crises in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Dilip. And thank you, everyone, for very fruitful discussions. Mr. Prin, Mr. Dilip, Mr. Stanley, thank you very much. ขอบคุณมากครับ With all the seminar topics, สวัสดีครับ สวัสดีครับ And with all these seminar topics, you have been participated today, from government policies to strategic reform plans from the private sector, potential frameworks to rehabilitate Thailand to normal state alongside the mass vaccination program. I'm very confident that the collaboration between the government agencies and the private sector will help Thailand recover to a stable and strong position once again. And as Thailand's first and only Thailand's English newspaper, the Bangkok Post stood beside Thai society through significant crises and crucial moments for many years. Stepping in the 75th year, Bangkok Post represents a strong and steady media delivering vital information and essential domestic and international news across all platforms to play its part, restoring the country and moving forward alongside Thailand. On its 75th anniversary, the Bangkok Post launched an online campaign under the theme Thailand Journey 2021, featuring historic moments collected since the paper was founded in 1946. The news archive is presented as data visualization graphics featuring Thailand's economy, society, politics, crises, and important events that will unfold the modern history of Thailand in a compelling ways. The collection is currently available to view at the Bangkok Post website. สำหรับงานดีๆในวันนี้นะครับจะเกิดขึ้นไม่ได้เลยครับหากขาดผู้ร่วม
Today's events will not have been possible without your participation, namely His Excellency Mr. Supathanapong Prumichau, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy, Mr. Yuttasak Supason, Governor of the Tourism Authority of Thailand, Mr. Abel Teung, Chief Executive Officer, Huawei Technologies Thailand Company Limited, Mr. Prin Panichapak, Deputy Leader and Head of Economic Team, Democrat Party, Mr. Dilip Rajakaria, Group Chief Executive Officer, Minor International, and Mr. Stanley Kang. He is Chairman of the Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce in Thailand, or JFCCT. And on behalf of Bangkok Post Company Limited, I would like to thank our sponsors, Bangkok Post Company Limited, PTT Exploration and Production Public Company Limited, Huawei Technology Company Huawei Technologies Thailand, Thai Oil Public Company Limited, Siam Commercial Bank, the Thai Stock Exchange of Thailand, Energy Absolute Public Company, and Kasikorn Thai Bank. I would like to thank all of you for joining us, and you can follow our interesting content and the news from Line Official of Bangkok Post, or you can scan the QR code from the screen. And that's end my role today, and I wish you all good health and stay safe from COVID-19. Thank you, everyone.